What was your first gig or job, or how did you get into crypto?
First crypto gig, I actually started doing freelance EVM development before I had a full-time job. We were very much strict on our process, partially for security reasons and also partially just we want people that can read directions and follow rules.
You have some open source programs or libraries, anything related to Solana that you think people should go through, try to contribute to, that are good signals to get hired?
Specifically adding token 2022 support, as well as like other utility functions that exist in Solana Program Crate or the Solana SDK. There's a lot of open source opportunities there. I'm very much a techno optimist and view AI as like a very valuable tool that people should be using. And I think it's a mistake if you're not experimenting with it. I just think you need to understand what it's good at right now. There's probably like 6 useful types of contracts. Like if we think about like what a blockchain is and what it's really good at.
Hi everyone and welcome to a new pod. Today we have Taylor. Taylor is the co-founder at Exo, and Exo is a dev shop out of the US. They primarily work with Solana companies. They help existing Solana companies build products on Solana. They also help other EVM companies move to Solana. If someone requires expertise in Solana, if they're trying to build a smart contract or something more deeper, Exo is one of the companies on Solana that helps you do it. We'll understand what does the day-to-day look like at Exo, what kind of projects are they working on, what are the technical challenges in building something like this, how do they hire, and everything around Solana. With that, Taylor, welcome to the pod. We'd love to know more about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me. Quick background myself, I've been an engineer for the last 10 years or so. Got started in crypto about 9 years ago. Started working on EVM stuff, tinkering around, but then switched to Solana in 2020. And had some success with some early DeFi protocols, winning a hackathon, and ultimately, starting a few different projects from there.
Got it. Very first question we ask people is, what was your first gig or job, or how did you get into crypto?
First crypto gig, I actually started doing freelance EVM development before I had a full-time job. There was this is back in 2016-ish or so. I think 0x had just launched as a DEX relayer on the EVM side of things. And there was a team that wanted to build, I think it was like a relayer aggregator. And so started doing some freelance development for EVM smart contracts, helping them build an aggregator of 0x relayers.
Got it. So from 2016 onwards, have you just been working in cryptos?
Yeah, full-time in crypto. Yeah, I got pulled into a group called Blockfolio back in 2017. I was there for a few years. That was eventually bought by FTX. So I was at FTX for a couple of years, and then started a couple projects while there, and started full-time in Solana in 2021.
Oh, super interesting. Very curious to know about what did you do at FTX? Were you on the trading side, or were you working on a different product than the core exchange?
So at Blockfolio, I was leading mobile development, and so when FTX bought Blockfolio, they're very much looking at acquiring the user base. I came over as part of helping, continue to build out the mobile application, transitioning it from Blockfolio to the FTX app, which was a very controversial thing for those folks that were pretty hardcore on Blockfolio. And then started just helping out more general like retail strategy. So, but mostly focused on front-end development, helping build out our product suite.
Got it. And did you leave FTX midway, or when it ended is when you thought of moving on to your next thing?
So I resigned, shortly when there were rumors going around that something was going on, and obviously had no idea what was going on, and decided, what, if I don't understand what's going on and I'm working here, I, can't be a part of this company. And then ultimately went back to working with my brother full time on Solana projects.
Very interesting. Would love to know what happened after that. Have you guys experimented with a few projects since, or was the Exo the first company that you started?
No, so we've been experimenting on Solana since 2020. We started with some DeFi protocols. We built an options protocol that traded on top of Serum, and that was just a hackathon project. And then after pivoting, we acquired another team out of Singapore that took over most of the derivatives stuff. And then we started pivoting to governance infrastructure and tokenomics infrastructure. And so when we started building that, we launched a product suite called Armada. And that was basically helping teams launch tokens, helping teams manage liquidity with third-party market makers in a decentralized way. And then also handle like tokenomics, like staking and protocol revenue distribution or whatnot. Part of that, like we actually helped build Bonk rewards and build the smart contracts there and help them kind of launch their, how they distribute their protocol revenue to stakers. And then after that, we kind of bumped into some regulatory issues, which Tommy has talked about extensively over a few different interviews and whatnot. But after that, decided to step away from the project and focus on consulting. We just saw a need in the market for strong Solana engineers. We, some of the most experienced since building on Solana since 2020, and realized that we could help fill that gap.
Got it. I want to dive deeper into that, into what you work on at EXO. But before that, while you're building EXO, do you ever feel the FOMO of building your own product or something of your own compared to helping other people do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we're very much founders at heart, and it's interesting growing a services company, right? Because you can only scale as much as you hire talent, because you can only bring on more clients if you have enough resources to service those clients. And so it's definitely has its own unique challenges, and it can sometimes be frustrating where, a product is not easier to scale per se, but you don't have to hire people to scale, right? And so I think there's definitely part of that is alluring to going back to building product. And I think for us, like the reason we decided to jump into consulting and building out this dev shop was, we didn't know exactly what we wanted to do yet. We didn't have conviction on any one single product that we came up with. And we felt that not taking a job and instead building out our own, dev shop allows us to get a different vantage point of the market, talk to other teams, see what problems they're facing, and then, maybe ultimately come up with another product that we want to build ourselves. So for us, it was, a great way to keep opportunities open and not close any doors.
Makes sense. And I was really, as a company like this, you get a lot of inbound from, ambitious ideas that haven't been tried, and some tested and tried ideas as well. And so you're at the center of a lot of attention. I guess you can always, build a product whenever you want to yourself. So I'm curious now, what kind of projects you guys work on? If you could talk about a few of them, the ones that shine and the ones that you can share on the pod right now.
Yeah, so we work on a wide range of products, like all different verticals. We've got a few different teams that we work with over a long period of time. Jito being one of them. For them, we're essentially seen as like an extension of their engineering team and help work on different projects they might have. I know some of our team has like helped update some of their, restaking, some of their chip router programs and whatnot. And this is all like a lot of smart contract work as well as back end infrastructure work. Other teams are more like DeFi teams. We'll work with some RWA issuers. We've worked with, I think like the most notable or one that we can talk about has been Agora, the stablecoin protocol. We've helped work with them on helping bridge their, EVM contracts to SVM. And then we've also done some DePIN work, working with DePIN teams, helping them build out their tokenomics strategy, building out the smart contracts for it. We work with a wide range of verticals. I'd say right now that the most common one we're getting inbound for has been RWAs. I think there's just a lot of institutions and other financial, technology firms that want to experiment with RWAs and tokenization. And, those are the teams that don't have the tech talent in-house, but they definitely have the funding to help pay for, external resources. So that's definitely where we found a lot of traction. And then we also have a strong background in, understanding legal compliance, KYC. Like that's definitely where part of my background being from, having spent some time at an exchange is helpful. And then also understand the, on-chain side of things. How do we build those, systems on chain to work with the off-chain systems that are, required?
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. We'd love to know, how do you guys hire and what kind of talent do you guys look for? What's the interview process like? Things like this.
So how we hire, everything comes from our job board. If you haven't gone through our careers page and you try to like DM us on LinkedIn, email, whatever, like we're just going to ignore it. Like we're very much strict on our process, partially for security reasons and also partially just We want people that can read directions and follow rules. So we're pretty strict on that. But the first thing we do is, if you've come through our, application, we'll scan your resume, look at your background, look at your GitHub, try to, look at for relevant experience. I think right now, we're definitely hiring more for more senior level roles. And so we'll looking for, relevant Solana experience. Even if that's open source contributions, we definitely look at, people's GitHubs, and if they have open source contributions to relevant projects, that's a very strong indicator of, one, that they know what they're doing, but two, they're high agency and willing to kind of take their own steps to prove themselves and kind of add value to other parts of the ecosystem. So we rank that very highly. From there, we do a quick phone interview for cultural, perspective. We want to make sure that this person is a strong communicator. We want to make sure that they're, easy to get along with, easy to work with, work well in a team and whatnot. So we'll do a 30-minute like cultural screening. Then from there, we have 2 technical screenings. These are very much meant to like mimic exactly what you'd be doing day to day at XO. The first is an architectural interview. So we have a prompt for folks to pseudocode a Solana smart contract architecture. So basically designing like what kind of state are you storing on chain? How are you thinking about the instruction set and whatnot? And it's meant to be interactive, like essentially we're the client and, the developer is the person asking us like, hey, you mentioned that you want this. There's a couple of different design decisions I can make implementing it. What do you think? And so it's meant to be a bit interactive. And then finally, we have a coding interview. That's an hour-long interview where we have a repository set up. We'll have them get access to it, and it's missing some functionality that they need to go ahead and implement and add tests for.
Got it. And so from what I can tell right now, both of these are like smart contract assignments as opposed to architect a smart contract and then code a smart contract the next round.
The first is architecting. The second is actually writing code for a smart contract.
Got it. Makes sense. So is that the sort of talent that you're looking for at the moment? Like people who can write programs on Solana, or is an engineer doing something else also? Which would be like front ends, back ends, client side Solana, writing flight libraries.
That's definitely the easiest thing for us to screen for, is more so because we feel like it's the one where there's less people. Like if like throughout that process, especially in the coding portion, we'll very quickly be able to tell whether Rust or not. And so like we write most of our backends in Rust. We do some TypeScript depending on the client and how they want testing and whatnot. But we'll very quickly know whether you have strong technical chops from that interview process. So we don't necessarily screen per se for specific like back-end stacks and whatnot. But as long as you have strong engineering fundamentals, like we're pretty confident you'll be able to fit into our process. And I think the other thing is like, people talk about how LLMs are, kind of evening the playing field for someone. Well, when it comes to like Solana, the SDKs are constantly changing. This is really true for most Web3 or whatnot, but so the LLMs are definitely less helpful there. And so at least like we need to screen for the thing that's going to be the most difficult for the person to pick up. And so we're more confident someone could pick up backend, engineering work on the fly versus picking up Solana engineering work on the fly.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have some open source programs or libraries, anything related to Solana that you think people should go through, try to contribute to, that are good signals to get hired?
I think, there's not a ton that come to mind. I guess like one I would say is Pinocchio. I think that's more of like something that's still very much in its infancy. And if you understand how Solana works and you understand it enough to be able to like contribute to the Pinocchio, repository, then that's like a very strong signal. There's also a lot of work that still needs to be done there, specifically adding token 2022 support, as well as like other utility functions that exist in Solana Program Crate or the Solana SDK. There's a lot of open source opportunities there. So it's definitely like you're going to be getting a little bit more deeper into the stack, a little bit more layer level. But that would definitely be one where if we saw someone that's been contributing to Pinocchio and they're looking for a job, like we're more likely than going to hire them.
Got it. Well, also, go ahead, Shek.
Yeah. You mentioned the majority of the kind of clients that most of the clients that are coming are like are the big companies or some of this traditional asset issuers who want to issue asset on Solana. So I'm curious I'm curious about what their real need is, because when they want to issue a token, the smart contracts for that already exist. Like, either the SPL token program or the token 22 programs. And also all of those extensions already exist on chain, right? So, I'm curious to understand from what you see, what are they really looking for? Is it like newer exotic transfer hooks that it adheres to their specific needs, or it's much more like vanilla that they can do directly with the existing token SDKs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so when we originally started working with RWA issuers, we thought, man, what a great product it would be to productize, them minting their tokens and whatnot, and it should be super easy because, like you said, Shake, like there's a lot of the tools already exist. But what we quickly realized when we started working with multiple of them is that, every single issuer has very different compliance and legal needs. And so it's not the minting of the token that is difficult and, the issuing of it. It's really making sure that they have the correct role-based access control systems on chain that they require, making sure that they have the correct compliance systems on chain that they, that their compliance team requires and whatnot. So it's not so much of the, hey, how do we get this token out there and create it? It's a lot more of the administrative and operational overhead that these teams require. And so, and especially because a lot of them, the ones that have been around for a while, they're very much stuck in their ways in the sense that they have, internal off-chain systems that, they already use for tracking, what investors are holding their tokens, have they, met KYC, requirements and whatnot. And they're not willing, they're not necessarily going to change that just to get a tokenization strategy out there. And so it's very much trying to like fit this new system in with their old legacy systems and making sure that the on-chain components can fit with the off-chain components. So it's a lot more on like the legal compliance side and operational, overhead.
Interesting. So what does it actually manifest as, right? For example, you guys worked extensively on the Solana attestation service, and how do you go about doing, for example, if you want to do an on-chain KYC or ensure that only a person who is authorized to hold this token or interact with this token is actually the person doing it? How do you do that? Like,
yeah, so there's a handful of different ways, and again, it depends on what the financial institution is comfortable with doing, right? So everyone's going to have a different strategy. Like one strategy is, hey, we have some sort of allow and block list on chain. You could just create that using PDAs, whatnot, right? Infinitely scalable, it works well. And then you could check it for using transfer hooks. That might work for some, but then if they're like, hey, we actually need a lot of downstream integrations with other DeFi protocols, as we've come to learn over the last years, the transfer hooks are pretty prohibitive of that, right? There's been a lot of pushback on the developer experience from transfer hooks from DeFi protocols. And so now a lot are moving towards this, using the default account state, setting it, to default to being frozen, and then deciding, if someone has passed KYC on their, internal system, sending a transaction on chains, acknowledging that this person has, finished KYC, and either unfreezing or thawing the account, or just marking it in some sort of allow or block list that it is, thawable. So it's, it's a bit different, but just got to make sure that it fits with their existing system. So there is some off-chain authority that gets to decide whether they have met the requirements. Not every team. There are also some teams that want to have certain data on chain. They're not going to put like personal information on chain, but they might want to know like what country the user is and store that on chain, so that way that could be used in some manner downstream. So some go beyond just allow and block lists and say, I need to have almost like a KYC profile for this user on the chain and tag it to their wallet. So they'll go through this off-chain process, going through normal KYC, document verification, etc. and then the institution will send a transaction on chain, storing what kind of information they have verified and need to have on chain.
How do you decide who works on what? Like, I'm assuming you have like 5 clients and maybe 10 engineers. So that like one engineer is working on a project at a time. Then once the company goes, are they benched for a few weeks, or do they move to a different project? Do you make them work on a personal project, which usually, happens in consults? So I'm very curious towards the execution of a dev shop when it comes to employee, arrangements.
Yeah, definitely. The resourcing has been interesting, or resource allocation has been interesting, to say the least. I think that's been one of our biggest learning curves is, working on a services company. It's definitely very much of, okay, who's got availability coming up such that it fits with the timeline of the prospective client. That's number one. Like we can't just take someone who's been working on a project for 2 months and shift them off the project even if they're the best fit for it. But then number two is like, if we have multiple engineers available for a project and we only need, a couple or, 1 or 2, whatever it is, we'll look at who's got the best skill set to match the project. Have they worked on something similar? That's a big indicator whether they can handle it. Have they, if that client needs to integrate with other protocols, has this, engineer interacted with those protocols? Have they integrated with those protocols before? And so I think that's generally like kind of how we look at it, is like who's going to be the best fit that's available. And then in terms of like how we work with the clients, we usually have at least 2 engineers. So it's at least one engineering manager, which is usually myself or Tommy or one of the engineers on a team who has, 3, 4, almost 5 years of experience on Solana. They're usually doing, helping with architecture, PR reviews, et cetera, making sure, the program quality is, or code is quality. And then we'll have, 1 to 2, sometimes more, depending on how big the project is. But most, if it's just a, short-term smart contract, like those usually can get done with 1 to 2 engineers. We'll have, those engineers focused on actual implementation. And so we usually spend, 1 to 2 weeks architecting the program, working with the client to make sure that, all the features are met. If they have an EVM contract that we need to port over, that usually takes a bit longer, but we'll read all the EVM code and then map it out for what we need to do on the SVM side of things. And then, once we've done the architecture side, then we start breaking down into tasks and going into development.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. I think that's all the question I got checking here.
How big is the team right now? I'm curious to understand how the team is set up. Right? Like you mentioned, like in most cases in dev shops, like with resource allocation is the major problem. You want to make sure that, your client, the number of incoming projects and the number of resources that you have are like in line.
Yeah, that's definitely been one of our toughest challenges. Right now we're a team of 8, including both Tommy and I, or a team of 8 engineers, and then we have a marketing person as well. But we've been trying to grow responsibly. Like we don't want to get into a place where we ever, if there's a downturn in the market where we have to let people go. Like we hire folks on a contractual basis, but we, treat everyone like full-time employees. That includes, even though we'll give people PTO if they need to take time off and whatnot. But with that said, we want to make sure that we grow responsibly because we treat people like they're full-time employees. And so to do that, we need to make sure that we're not overhiring too quickly to the point that, sometimes we're actually telling clients that, we can't take them on, or if they have too tight of a timeline, we're just not going to be a fit for them. Or we have to kind of delay starting their project if that's acceptable to them. So it's led us to turning people down when we try to grow slowly. But with that, we have tried to bring on clients in a manner where we kind of have some sort of balance. Like the way I explain is we take a barbell approach. So on one side, you have larger teams. These are your, hundreds of millions to billions of FDV type protocols, or teams that have raised significant amount of capital with large valuations that, have some sort of stability. And these are longer term agreements. These are, 6, 12, or even, 6 to 12 month or even indefinite contracts. These are like Jito, Solana Foundation, et cetera. And those like those are the teams that like if a bear market hits, they're not just going to turn away. They're still pushing forward on all of their initiatives. And then on the other side, you have your more shorter term startup-y like clients that are 3 to 4 month projects. Maybe ideally raised a Series A or more. But if the bear market hits, they maybe not have found product market fit yet, and they're more likely to churn. And so we try to find balance in that barbell approach where we bake in stability to our overall team by having those longer term, larger clients, but then also make sure that we are utilizing all of our resources effectively, all of our engineers effectively by having, these other shorter term contracts.
Interesting. I'm curious to hear about your thoughts on AI or AI assisted coding, because I understand that for a lot of the spec and the API of things that are core to Solana or in programs and also the Web3.js, that keeps changing, and LLMs may not do a good job at it, but things that are external plumbing, right? So how do you are you leveraging AI, or do you still feel that they're not adequate enough where you could fully use them? Because now you're using AI, if it works, means that your profit margins are a lot higher.
Yeah, very much depends what we're working on. Like, I personally don't utilize it a lot. I'd say I probably utilize it maybe like 10% of the time, maybe 15. And that's really only if I'm doing, some mundane task. Like I started using it for some like DevOps stuff the other day, just like helping write like CloudFormation scripts and other sort of things. But I don't use it a ton on the Solana side. At least this time last year, or even like beginning of this year, it was really rough. The LLMs would hallucinate anytime you were querying it about, some sort of Solana specific code. I know there's been a lot of work done for like MPC servers on Solana and other sort of things to help, improve the learning or feedback loop for these LLMs, whatever you want to call it. So there's definitely a few models I'm looking, or more fine-tuned models that I'm looking to like start experimenting with. I don't actually know how much of, I don't think a lot of our team uses it on the Solana side, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're using it when we're building like front-end applications and maybe even some sort of back-end components. But yeah, I think like on the smart contract side, they're just not there yet to be useful. I feel like I end up like, if I copy pasta their code over, I'm ending up spending more time fixing it versus I've been writing Solana code long enough that my brain's just going to be faster than the LLM at this point.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, other than mundane tasks, I think even when you're writing backends that are not crypto, where it gets more complex beyond the point, it's just easier to write it yourself.
Yeah. And that's not to say that we don't view it as, or I don't view it as like an existential threat or something. Like I'm very much a techno optimist and view AI as like a very valuable tool that people should be using. And I think it's a mistake if you're not experimenting with it. I just think you need to understand what it's good at right now, project what it's going to be good at in the future, and then, try to figure out like when it's optimal to use and when it's not. Like there's a time and a place for every tool. Right now for like Solana smart contracts, like I haven't found the right tool for it, and I haven't found the right LM for it. But that's not to say that it'll happen in the future. And then we'll probably reevaluate, how does it, like, I don't think I'd ever want to get to a point where we have to let people go because of an AI. I think it's more of, it's going to help speed people up. And so what that would then do is allow us to probably take on more clients, keep the same amount of engineers, but take on more clients, just because we might be able to churn through contracts faster and things like that. And then maybe, we might have to adjust how we do pricing. Like right now, all of our clients, like we bill on a monthly basis. We don't do project-based billing, just because that's been problematic in the past. But, maybe we'd have to do project-based billing because we could churn through projects a lot quicker because we're leveraging AI to code really fast.
God, I have a fairly controversial question for you, Taylor. Tolling keeps saying there are only 6 useful smart contracts ever, but a lot of the work you seem to be doing, revolves around building smart contracts for other clients, right? So, these two seem to be at like, at the polar ends of what you actually need with smart contracts. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Are there only 6 useful smart contracts, or is it infinity?
Love the question. I think I would rephrase it to that there's probably like 6 useful types of contracts. Like if we think about like what a blockchain is and what it's really good at, the trustlessness helps us financialize everything, right? Like as we start seeing this wave of tokenization, we're seeing how we can tokenize or, financialize anything. There's been a lot of wacky experiments on the blockchain. And so I think I would say that, yeah, there's probably like 6 useful types of contracts, but not necessarily 6 contracts, right? Like the first contract written for one type is not going to be the best. There might be other types of there might be other features, other mechanisms that have certain benefits in certain scenarios. So I think there's going to always be more than just 6 smart contracts that are worth using.
Interesting. So double clicking on that, right? When you say type, are you talking about like, for example, now SPL token to P token, both are same interface, same functionality, but then the implementation is completely different, right? One is an optimization of the other. Do you mean to say in that manner, or you were talking about, the interface remains the same, but then the behavior is slightly different because you want something more nuanced?
I was thinking a little bit more nuanced. Like the SPL token to P token is an interesting one, but I think less on the optimizations, because in theory, like if SPL token was not immutable, then they could just upgrade it to be P token and it's still the same contract, right? I think more of what I'm thinking is, okay, you have very different types of AMMs. You have, constant products. You have different types of curves on constant products. And so I don't think that they're just always going to be one AMM, but I do, I think AMM is one of the core types of smart contracts that make sense to have and will be widely used. So I think it's more if there's going to be variations on these types of contracts.
Interesting. And also one interesting trend that I've been observing is that now with dark AMMs, they're like the topic of the past couple of months. So to my understanding is that they do a lot of their things off chain, and that they have like a very low cost Oracle update. That's pretty much what they do, right? So you're also kind of starting to see this hybrid architecture where a lot of the heavy lifting is off chain, and you're kind of executing in maybe a trusted environment, and then you do the least complicated part on chain. So yeah, do you feel like that also reduces the surface area for what type of computation you eventually want to run on chain?
I mean, so the prop AMMs are super interesting. I mean, like I think it's an evolution that makes sense, and mostly because the reason it's possible is because Solana is so cheap. It's very cheap to make these Oracle updates. It's more expensive to move liquidity around, especially concentrated liquidity. So I think it's an evolution that makes sense. I still think there's a world where that takes a lot of active market making on the off-chain side of things. So there's still a lot of infrastructure and overhead there. And so I still think that there's going to be value in having a constant product AMM that is more for long tail assets. That's not to say prop AMMs aren't getting into long tail assets. They certainly are and certainly will, but they're going to be very focused on the ones that are doing high volume, closer to blue chip than like very long tail. So I think both will exist, but it's definitely a market evolution that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Good. Do you have anything else? More questions?
Thank you so much, Taylor, for your time. It was super insightful. I'm sure people learned a lot from it. Do you have any parting thoughts for the audience? Anyone else be looking to get into Solana development?
Ooh, if you're looking to get into Solana development, definitely check out blueshift.gg. I really like those guys. They're awesome, and I think the platform they built was really cool. Also just uses Solana docs. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is NFT Taylor. I'm always happy to help people along in their Solana journey. But no, other than that, thanks so much, guys. This was super fun. And for anyone that's looking for a job, feel free to apply on our job board, Exotech.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you so much for joining us, Taylor.
Thank you, Taylor.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Right. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.